golden child brother got my fiancée pregnant, so my family abandoned me. After 5 years of no contact, my sister reached out with a big request. My brother Samuel was always the golden child. Being the firstborn and a boy made him the apple of my parents' eyes. I was used to living in his shadow, but what happened 6 years ago was just too much. I got engaged to an amazing girl, Emma. Our parents were thrilled because they absolutely adored her. We were a big and loud family, free to wear that if you wanted to be with one person, you got all of them. Not that I had many options. But Emma had this calming sway over everyone. It was so easy for people to like her. I was pretty stoked, and my parents were already talking about how she would be a perfect daughter-in-law. I'm not going to lie, it made me feel good, and for a change I appreciated being the center of everyone's attention. One particular day was etched in my memory forever. I was sitting in my room when Emma showed up with a cake. Emma said they didn't celebrate engagement announcements here, but I could always win them over, and she wanted to help me out. She barged in on me and gave me a tight hug. We made out for a bit until I shooed her off so that I could take a shower and join the party downstairs. When I did, it turned out to be a surprise engagement party. Emma had planned the whole thing, so I was as blindsided as everyone else. Looking back, it was the best day of my life until the worst one came along. 6 months into our engagement, Samuel showed up with an absurd proposal. He wanted the two of us to trade fiancés. Apparently, he was in love with Emma, and he thought it would be more convenient for both of them if we just switched partners. It was preposterous. Samuel and I had enough fights in the past, but that shouting match in the living room as our parents watched in horror, was the one that really went the extra mile. I told him I loved Emma more than my own life. Of course, I wouldn't leave her. Samuel actually had the audacity to claim that he was the better choice for Emma because he was financially more stable. Plus, he already had a house and a steady job, while I was still trying to get my life together. Hell, Samuel even tried to attack me physically. I was so angry. I wanted to punch him so badly. I have no doubt that he would have done it too, but my dad and 2 of his friends intervened. Alternatively, I chose to live separately because I valued independence. Who wouldn't, right? I was 27 at the time and I needed to be out of my dad's house. It just made sense. I found a decent apartment and moved in a few days later. By then, Emma and I had sorted everything out, but I was always scared that she might end up with Samuel. What if he really did turn out to be the better choice? But Emma's reassurance never wavered, and eventually I started trusting her. What I didn't account for was the wedge that this whole mess had created between me and my family. They were very unhappy when they found out that Samuel and I were going to live separately. Of course, they put the whole blame on me. He was the golden boy who couldn't make a mistake, and I was the failure who couldn't ever get anything right. Mom cried all the time, and Dad was simply disappointed in me. Samuel's happiness was supposed to be the only thing that ever mattered, and if I was the one getting in the way of that, then I was the problem, according to them. Over the next few weeks, things got awkward between Samuel and me. He had this big plan for something called a double wedding, where he and Emma would get married, and I, along with his girlfriend Jessica, would get married too. It was a pretty picture that he had in mind, but nobody else did. I remember how he rehearsed his speech for his wedding proposal to Jessica in front of me at least 100 times. I used to help him with the words and the lines, so when he did propose to her a month after that fight, he didn't really mean to keep it a big secret from me. But it did bother me. I guess I never would have been at peace with this whole thing. I loved my family and wanted them to be happy, but Samuel being with Emma, even if I was marrying Jessica, wasn't something I could get on board with so easily. But they didn't look away from me. One day, Samuel's girlfriend Jessica confronted Emma and told her the truth: she was pregnant with Samuel's child. And not just any child, but a girl, which sort of put me in my place. At first, I was furious. I remember thundering into his room and yelling at him at the top of my voice, and that was the first time I outright challenged the idea that he was untouchable within this family. Samuel let me say whatever I wanted to in front of everyone and just kept quiet. Then he said I was blowing things out of proportion and that he'd figure this out if I just let him go. He was waiting for the right moment to tell everyone, and I had ruined all of it. That sobered me up a bit. Back then, he was right. He deserved the chance to tell our parents the truth himself. My parents especially deserved to hear this ugly truth from his mouth and not mine. So I backed off, but I couldn't pretend like things were normal with that sitting. It was going to be hard for a while. Emma was a little heartbroken too, hurt by the mess created by my friend. Nobody's ever going to second guess the genuineness of the two of us if he chose to be with Emma. After a lot of thought, when Emma decided to leave, of course nobody was happier than my parents because their more favorite son could finally have the life he always wanted. But yeah, that meant leaving me. It's been years, but just thinking about it makes me emotional. You know, she was my rock in so many ways, and losing her, especially because of Samuel, really took a toll on my mental health. If it wasn't for my friends and colleagues, I think I would have just given up and gone home. I was practically dead to them anyway, might as well make it official. After Emma left, my mental health started deteriorating. I quit my job, which was still a disaster back then, just to at least try to find some solace back in my parents' house. But nobody opened the door for me. I stood there for hours, and not a single person bothered to speak to me or even find out what happened. I was so devastated that after a few days, I just took a cab all the way back to my apartment and left. After that, I never tried to contact them, and neither did they. I heard about Samuel and Emma. I knew they got married because my school friend accidentally showed me the profile that my father had created to share pictures from his boys' double wedding. They seemed happy in those pictures, and the envy I felt was ridiculous. It was bad enough that my girl left me, and I didn't even get to hold a grudge against my brother because we didn't even stay in touch. I clearly remember when I heard about some family crisis at a supermarket. I was elated, and there might have been a spark of hope in me that this could redeem me in their eyes. But when I reached there, I remember what Dad said to me. They had only let me in because they were going on vacation, and they needed somebody to watch over the house and the pets. I was more than welcome to do that. I just shifted back in with them. But the vacation didn't change anything. Slowly, I just learned to live without my family. I made my own little family with the people who really cared about me, my friends and colleagues. Life goes on no matter what anyway. 3 years ago, Jessica dumped Samuel. The divorce hit out of nowhere. Nobody saw it coming because from the outside they were the perfect couple. I heard my father say that once, to be very honest, he looked more devastated than Samuel. After Samuel got his divorce, he did try to find me. He called me on my 32nd birthday and apologized for what he did to me. He begged me to meet him once, but to be very frank, I didn't have any interest left in being with my family because of all the stuff that I'd been through. Despite sticking around, how they treated me hurt a lot, and I just wanted to move on from it, so that's what I did. It's been 5 years since I've spoken to anybody from my family, but yesterday I got a call from my sister, Elisa, who's my stepmom's daughter. I was pretty confused about how she got my number and why she was calling me, because there could only be one reason why we ever needed to contact each other, and I think I was past that. Plus, Elisa and I were never too close compared to Samuel and me. I did help her a lot with her math when I was in high school and she was still in middle school, just to earn some brownie points from my dad and be the good kid. But nothing more than that. Despite my silence, she got to talking pretty quickly. They all somehow knew that I was about to be a dad. Plus, she was the favorite child right now, so I guess she had a little more liberty with the family. There was a bit of finesse to the whole equation too. Mom and Dad were decent in the family now. They'd been living there for the past 2 years after Samuel brought Jessica to their house about a year ago. Like a little family reunion, just without me. But while exchanging details on the conference call, she mistakenly let it slip that Samuel already had a daughter a year ago. I'm telling you, my reaction was ridiculous. I dropped my phone right there. I just couldn't believe what had happened. I finally got a baby girl. I had always imagined my kid to be like Emma and be the reason for my family to come back to me. We talked for a while. It was a pretty short call. She thanked me for the support as usual and said, "You deserved this." My mind was in pieces. I just kept rewinding and reliving the past 5 years. Various voices murmured within me, some angry, some sad. I guess this is shock when your mind and heart just stop working because it's just too much to deal with. At one point I broke down. I've never felt so weird before, so freaking happy and so incredulous about something at the same time. 2 days later, I got a mail with a picture of the newborn baby. There was no return address, not that I needed one. I knew it was from my father. I locked myself in the room and just let the tears flow. Maybe it was the hormones mixed with the insanity, but at that moment, wild thoughts were coming to me. Yes, I wanted my family back in my life so freaking badly, but did I really want it like this? With another woman's child, no matter how much she is my brother's daughter? I wallowed like that for a couple of days, locked up in my room. By now, I was 33 weeks pregnant. My colleagues got worried and irritated at the same time. It took a bit of convincing over the phone from the hospital, but eventually, they told me not to come to work until I figured stuff out. So here I am at 33 weeks, a man who got pregnant because his brother, Samuel, cheated on him with his fiancée, Emma, leading to a 5-year-long fight between me and my family. Now, my family, who cut me out of their lives after Sam gave Emma up, a girl I loved enough to marry, was trying to woo me back with a granddaughter who was genetically mine but, for the most part, hadn't been under my roof, nor would she be, in all probability. It's all freaking insane. So I'm here right now to seek help. What should I do? Do I just ignore everything, cut him off from my mental map, and leave them to their peace? Or do I try to reconnect, at least in the interest of my child, with days passing so fast that the date of her birth is drawing near? I need help now. Update. Hi everyone. Thank you so much for all your input. It was a wild journey. Guys, I did not expect to go through everything that happened. I have a few kisses and some slaps too, so it's a win-lose situation, I guess. As some of you pointed out, my hospital was the first one to have an expectant transgender father in history. We got a lot of media attention, some for the right reasons, and some not so much, but the chaos sort of kept me grounded, and I forgot about the crux of the matter, my family. I knew I would have to visit them after delivering my daughter because there was no such facility, and I had to go through a normal delivery, which worried me a lot too. But the status of my family was something I wasn't even bothered about, and then my daughter arrived. When the doctor handed her over to me, the first thing I felt was a different sort of love. She was my child, and I cradled her close to my chest, crying with happiness and pain. I'd always assumed that I'd have to deal with it later, but when I finally saw my daughter, I understood how much she meant to me and just how much this whole saga had taken from me. It hurt so bad I barely made a sound. Everybody was busy staring at my daughter. Nobody even considered wanting to speak with me. But that pain only lasted the time it took to shut those thoughts out of my head because it was just too distracting to deal with such heavy emotions at such critical times. I needed to be strong for my baby. But when we did reach home, the media spotlight had started dimming out, and I finally had space to breathe and think. I realized that I had to take the plunge, so I reached out to my family. The welcome I received was so freaking bizarre. It felt like walking back into a house that I hadn't left in years. I visited my parents before reuniting with Samuel, and when I walked in through those doors, I almost felt delirious at some point. My dad just looked up from the newspaper and said, "Oh, finally, you're here. What's the name of the girl?" That was it. No crying, no heartfelt apologies, just that a very matter-of-fact statement that almost took my breath away. I mean, yeah, I had decided to go back to them for my child's sake, but in that very moment, a big part of me just refused to even enter the house. But I did reach there, and I was in the living room again, among the family, the one thing I'd wanted for such a long time. It was so bewilderingly boring and commonplace. I guess that was what hurt the most. After that, the pattern was pretty much the same. We all moved on as if the last 5 years had never happened. My parents started doting on me and my daughter so much that it felt suffocating at times. The sympathy I wanted for the time they cut me off from Andrew could not be found anywhere. They even forgot that I was supposedly Andrew. Of course, they knew I was a transgender man, but in this case, I think they forgot that he was the real man. And the sister I told you about, the one who called me up to tell me about the pregnancy. There was no such person in my house. It was just so mind-numbingly casual that I almost forgot that it had ever happened. The real shock came when I finally met Samuel and his daughter, my daughter, Belle. He was just lounging about in the living room. We exchanged nods and cursory small talk before getting to the point. I wanted to see her. He called Belle down, and my daughter appeared. I can't explain in words, but that moment has been playing on repeat in my head ever since. Many people talk about this experience being a once-in-a-lifetime thing, how they say it changes them forever. Looking at my daughter for the first time was like that for me. I'd expected to feel anger, but all I felt was a sense of bitter calm. Samuel was having fun talking about her, but she just stuck by me, and Andrew turned out to be a big help. At least I was able to open my mouth to answer the questions, ensuring that I had an understanding of her habits and wouldn't have to depend on Samuel for that. But after 15 minutes or so, Samuel went back to Emma, and I introduced myself as their brother to my sibling and my daughter. The introduction was the most casual thing that had ever happened. She was used to the fact that I was her brother, and she seemed to be cool with it. She didn't bat an eyelid or even look confused. The wretched part of it all was that I wasn't either. Years of being detached had separated me from my family, so it was easy for me to accept that this would be the way things would be. And now, Samuel was offering conditional access to me. I could visit and talk to my daughter, but only if I agreed to have an amicable relationship with my family. Emma and Samuel would make sure that my daughter knew who her father was, but it would be up to me to decide which father I was going to be to her, the biological one who barely found the courage to even look at her, or Samuel, who'd held her, cheered, and celebrated her from the minute she'd been born. He gave me a choice: either be their brother or their daughter's father. I said that I would always be her father, but she'll need her grandparents, which technically she didn't. I couldn't let something as stupid as my ego get in the way of that, so I agreed to be simple for the sake of my daughter. Now I finally have my family back, and as much as I want to hate them, I just can't. I know it's not the healthiest environment for our girl to grow up in, and I am trying to accept that it's fine. A little toxicity never killed anybody. And today something happened for the first time. My daughter finally claimed my finger. Now that I know I'll have access to her and be a part of her life, I could finally touch her. I don't know what you guys have to say, but for me, she's my family, and I gave Emma up years ago. But I won't make that mistake with my daughter again. It's crazy how one little epiphany can change your whole world.